My name is John Dugan, and I'm absolutely privileged to be here. I serve as our Chief Research and Development Officer and co-founder of the Center for Expanding Leadership and Opportunity. Today, we're here with a panel of cross-sector leaders. We're going to have an incredible conversation that focuses really on the work of the Allstate Foundation to engage youth ages 5 to 25 all across this country in the work of service. As we sit here today, the common thread for all of us on this stage is that a moment happened where we got a call that we answered, and we weren't quite sure what was going to be on the other end of that call. And it was an opportunity to join a movement to say, if we can increase access and quality of service opportunities, we have the potential to change the direction and accelerate the learning and development of young people, as well as transform schools and communities. And so today we want to share with you a number of strategies that each of the organizations are using, give you some very tactical and tangible resources to take back to you, to your communities, and think through what is coming out of this new initiative, this new movement. As we wrap up today, I want to make sure that we'll leave some time at the end for questions, and then an announcement from the Allstate Foundation as well. Let's get into the conversation, and as we do that, I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves quickly. We are joined first by Andrea Delblano, Chief Editor of Time Magazine for Kids. And can you talk to us a little bit about Time and what you all are doing at Time for Kids related to service?
Yes, happily. I'm so excited to be here today. For people who aren't familiar with Time for Kids, we are classroom magazine, actually several of them, that teach current events and teach kids about the world around them, primarily through classrooms. We serve kindergarten through 8th graders in 5 different age editions. And each of our magazines comes with a curriculum guide for educators to use. Our assumption each week is that teachers don't know much about the topics that we're putting in the magazine, and we want them to feel confident to teach them, so we give vocabulary words, lesson plans, quizzes, extra reading, all sorts of information for them to be able to sort of use the magazine right out of the box. Time for Kids has been around for 30 years. Our parent publication, Time, has been around for 101 years. We've seen a lot of change over the years, but one thing that we've seen that is consistently true is that these kids are amazing, and that they give all of us so much hope and excitement about the future, and that if you let them into the conversation, they really have a lot to say. As it relates to service, I think we're going to get into more detail about what we're doing soon, but part of what our mission is with service is what our mission is generally with Time for Kids, which is to give kids voice and agency even as young as at 5 years old, and to make them understand that as they're finding their way in the world, they don't have to necessarily follow in a path. They can set their own course, figure out what interests them, what works for them, how they can make a difference, whether it's at their school level, their classroom level, their community, the whole world, whatever their ambitions are. And as it relates to service, that's still 100% true. We're trying to equip kids with a sense of agency and the sense that they can make a difference even if they're too young to be heard on a large stage, too young to cast a vote, all of those things.
I feel like you may have the most fun job in the entire United States of America. And so we're going to come back to this, and I want to specifically talk about Service Stars and how that's a platform to elevate those youth voices and really showcase that. We're also joined by Alix Guerrier, and he is the CEO of Donors Choose. And we have this incredible opportunity with you all to really think about what does it mean to microfinance into classrooms. Will you tell us a little bit about Donors Choose?
Yes. Thank you, John. I also have a pretty cool job, it turns out, so we can debate which one is the best one.
We will take a poll at the end.
Yeah. And I just want to say how thrilled I am as well, not only to be here and get to talk to this audience, but also just to have a chance to meet you and the rest of the panelists. It's been a real pleasure. A little bit about Donors Choose. We are a nonprofit organization focused on educational equity. We're trying to be a little bit provocative. We're asked the question, what might it look like if teachers actually got everything that they need in order to create the best learning experiences for kids? I used to be a high school math teacher myself, and those of you in the audience, maybe you've been an educator, know how simultaneously basic, but then also how transformational that question could be. The way that we operate is that any public school teacher in the country can come to Donors Choose and create a request for stuff that they need in the classroom. Then we work with donors, both individuals and large donors like the Allstate Foundation, which is really a seminal donor, especially in the area of service. And we fulfill those requests and send the stuff to teachers where hopefully it makes educational magic. The tie to service is that every day teachers are coming on to Donors Choose and creating projects really on all kinds of topics, but that includes service-oriented projects. And so I checked yesterday. As of yesterday, there were 400 live projects focused on leading their kids through service. Over the last year, we have funded about 3,000 projects, total of $1.9 million just on this service topic. And a lot of credit's going to go to Allstate Foundation, I'll say, as we get into more details about our partnership. But that's the link to service, and it really helps to enable teachers to create those service-oriented experiences for kids.
I love that you have the firsthand experience of being in the classroom and knowing what that kind of funding can do to transform the educational experience. We'll come back and talk more about some of what you're seeing emerge and what you think the next sort of wave of influence on this might look like. Our third panelist, we are so excited to have here, Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Secondary School Principals, Ronn Nozoe. Ronn, talk to us about your organization. I know you work with national student councils, you work directly with classrooms and secondary education. How does service play into all of this, and help the audience get to know your organization a bit?
First of all, aloha mai kako. The proper response is to say aloha back, so let's try it again. Yeah. Aloha mai kako.
Aloha.
All right, okay, welcome South by Southwest. Thank you, Joe and I'm John and the whole Allstate Foundation for allowing me to be part of this. The National Association of Secondary School Principals is the country's foremost leadership organization for middle and high school assistant principals and principals. And just by a show of hands in here, how many of you were National Honor Society members growing up? Don't be shy, you all should have your hands up. How many of you were participated in student council? So 100 years ago, in case you didn't know, over 100 years ago, principals founded the National Honor Society and the National Student Council, right? And we still own and administer those programs. And this is our connection to the Allstate Foundation, because in addition to focusing on school leadership, we also focus heavily on student leadership and student agency and student voice. And so we're really excited because this opportunity with the Allstate Foundation helps us to grow our reach and empower more kids to focus on their dreams of providing service to their communities. And we help advisors and principals and assistant principals understand how to better support the kids to do that work.
It's amazing. I think one of the things that stands out is the strategy of the Allstate Foundation not to look at a singular sector, or not to just focus on educators or to school systems or youth directly, but to think of this as a holistic system. And I want to get into a little bit about the actual direct effect that you all are seeing through these new initiatives. And Alix, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what you're hearing from the ground when schools and teachers receive these funds. What is it enabling for them?
I described the core model, which is that teachers are coming onto the site every day to ask for resources, and that is because they need those resources. And you probably have your own perspective, because actually you've played a lot of roles in the educational system, including district leadership, and you work with principals now. There are a lot of great ideas that we can all agree would actually make a huge difference for kids that get blocked, essentially, by lack of resources and supports at the grassroots level, even when we all agree that it would really make a difference. And so that goes for curriculum ideas, like curriculum adoptions. There are some really great curricula that get implemented, but at the district level, but then when it comes down to the classroom level, implementation just isn't there because teachers aren't able to make the, meet their students' needs. And that also applies for great ideas like service. There's a lot of research about how important it is to engage students in service, that that type of engagement actually translates over, has impact not just in the community, sort of the direct impact of that service, but then also the impact of the student's engagement on their own learning. An engaged student is a much more productive learner. But teachers need stuff and they need the support in order to create the visions that they have for how those service projects play out.
It sounds like it disentangles the systems and gets resources directly to the teachers. Ron, I'd be curious, as someone who works with principals, how that flows then. So often teachers have to go to a district or a principal to get resources, and this sort of cuts that out and provides more direct access. Do you see that as something that principals will be able to then really use for their teachers writ large?
Well, first of all, we love donors choose. And second, no educator should ever have to come out of pocket to provide for. We're in the United States of America. This is silly that people have to pay out of pocket to make. As a former teacher, I'd be collecting up all the notepads and all the pens in here to take them back to my classroom so that the kids who didn't have paper and pens, you all stole them all too, you know, right? So well, excuse me, in education, it's not stealing, it's borrowing for the greater common good. So, that's right. But we love folks that. The reality is that there aren't enough dollars yet now to go around for the incredible work that happens in every single classroom and every single school. And so it does take community partners and concerned citizens to pitch in and help. And we really appreciate, like, it does take, it doesn't solve the problem of not enough funding, but it does make sure that kids get what they need and the people who directly support kids get what they need in order to make it happen. And so I'm thrilled that you guys, I didn't know that you were that active supporters of Donors Choose, but I was just telling Alex, we were at an event and watching teachers win those gift cards was like the best thing to see the joy, because it's not for themselves. Yeah. You all know, it's not for you, it's for the kids that you serve. And so that is not talked about enough in society today, about this selfless giving that educators do every day, day in and day out in service of others.
I remember early in my career at education collecting Post-it notes after exercises to then recycle and reuse for the next class. And it seems so small, but it really makes such a magnitude of difference. I'm curious too, Alex, when you talk with folks on the ground about what it's enabling through service, I think oftentimes we think about classroom support as basic needs. This is creating opportunity on top of basic needs. What does that look like?
Well, I actually brought some examples, but let me back up and just describe a little bit of how this creative partnership works and how it's tied with Service Stars, Time for Kids, and really this is the brainchild of the Allstate Foundation and Greg in particular, who I think maybe we'll hear from later. Yes, applause. If you know Greg, then you know that that's a moment for applause. The way that this partnership works, that's creative, and I think our team is really quite proud of it and proud to be a part of it, is that, I described the model. In this model, teachers are invited through the campaign to create projects focused on student-led service efforts that are aligned with the missions that Time for Kids has outlined. Yeah, so these missions, you know them, but they include spreading kindness and fighting hunger and protecting animals. And yes, exactly. So doing those things. I'll just say that we're in the second year. It started in 2023. Since 2023, over, I think I wrote it down here. 2,300 service projects aligned with Service Stars have been funded. So that's a total of $1.5 million from the Allstate Foundation. Again, going straight to teachers and the resources the teachers need to create these amazing experiences for kids. Let me give you some examples, because I brought some. So just to sort of illustrate the diversity of projects. One, the title, I just love it. It's called Blanketing the Community with Love. This is a middle school in Chicago, Illinois. Here's a quote from the teacher, because what she's talking about is the recognition, even among the students, about the large number of new arrivals to the country coming in. And the students are seeing this, and they want to respond. So this is a quote. Many of these families left their homes with very little and are not prepared for the unpredictable Midwest winters. Remember, this is Chicago, Illinois. And so these are families facing homelessness or else crowded shelters. Our students saw this and spoke about the need to do something. And so what she did was she used the funding to get a bunch of no-sew blanket kits, and then the kids worked together to assemble those blankets and assemble care packages and send them out to families. So that's one example. I'll give you a very different example, and this is a favorite because I grew up in New Haven, Connecticut, and this is an example from New Haven, Connecticut. Again, these are middle schoolers, but this is a classroom teacher that used the funds to get a bunch of pollinator-friendly supplies, and it actually added to an existing community garden effort that she was running with her middle schoolers. But this added the specific effort of trying to, re-attract bees and butterflies and birds, pollinators, and the kids were learning about that as well. And actually, one thing I'll note about both of these examples is that both of these examples happened at schools where actually the majority of the kids come from low-income backgrounds. And actually a majority of the kids in both of these cases come from traditionally underserved racial identities. We have a particular equity focus on that. And the reason I'm pointing that out, actually I remember growing up in New Haven and going to schools like this, what it felt like to sort of be pathologized, as a student and as a school. There's a lot to point out in terms of challenges. But a project like this really enables a shift in perception on the part of students. They're positive agents. They're not being acted upon, but they're the actors. And I can't overstate the amount of benefit that brings. Again, not just the direct, it's great to have bees and butterflies. So that's amazing. That's already a win. But then these kids have this experience of being change agents themselves. And I promise you that goes back into what they're learning in the classroom.
I love the connection to both curriculum and content, but also personal development, community development. And there is something to be said when we expand the definition of service beyond just a macro level. It really can move the needle locally in powerful ways. Andrea, I'm curious about Service Stars. Will you tell the audience a little bit about that program and how you've sort of crafted it to message to a younger generation of rising leaders?
Absolutely. I'm going to share my meet cute with Greg because it's a great origin story of all of Service Stars. He saw a Time for Kids activity book on a store shelf. I don't know if it was Barnes & Noble or Target or something, and learned that Time for Kids is out there in the world and did some research online and found my email address and contacted me. And we got on the phone, and instantly this idea was born. It has taken many forms and a lot of work to refine it, but we immediately felt that starting with age 5, which is where the Time for Kids readership begins, was a great place to start with teaching kids about the values of service and the benefits of it and the pleasures of it, really. And so over time, we worked together with our teams to bring this plan into life. And what it really looks like is it's a sort of twofold platform on Service Stars. The first is that we're elevating and showcasing service work that kids are doing. We're really focused on making sure that it feels accessible. So whether, as I noted earlier, whether it's helping within your very small local community, whether it's helping in your state level, whatever work you're doing, we want kids to see that it's important. We want to showcase work that seems attainable to kids rather than makes them feel like, well, I don't know how I could ever do that, and sort of turns them off. So on a monthly basis, we pick a kid of the month who we focus on what the work is that they're doing in our pillars. Alix named some of them. We have 12, I believe, maybe 8 pillars that we focus on to just sort of organize it. Really, any service is something that we want to celebrate, but we kind of break it down into protecting the environment, helping animals, working for literacy, civic engagement. And what we do is we showcase the work of one kid on a monthly basis and then invite all the other kids to join us. And that is what we call our mission of the month. And something that we worked really hard to make sure is that there was no barrier to entry for these kids. We wanted kids to understand that any act of service is important. And a lot of that was just in naming it for kids, in making sure that they understand that service is something they're already doing. Whether it's a small act of kindness, whether it's inviting somebody to sit at their lunch table, whether it's picking up litter at their school playground, they're already doing it. And they just need to recognize that, and then I think it gives them the confidence to kind of grow and try new things. So in our mission of the month, we give them prompts and ideas as a starting point. And they range from something very small, like offer to walk an elderly neighbor's dog, to a larger classroom effort like start a community fridge. And we focus really hard on making sure that there aren't, again, needs that many kids don't have access to. We don't need a parent who can dedicate all of their time to helping them with this. They don't need to have a huge amount of money, that we're not asking them to buy all of the groceries and start a community fridge. We're trying to make sure that they understand that everybody can participate in the level in which they feel comfortable. And as Alex noted, we're in year 2 of doing it, and it has been amazing to watch. The particular lens that Time for Kids is taking on it too is helping teachers with curriculum around it. So as I noted, everything that we do has a curriculum component where we align to standards and try and help fit into teachers' already required program rather than make it just supplemental. And service is an interesting kind of growth area because it is not necessarily required, but it is something that they can tailor to meet the needs of many of their teaching requirements and many of their social emotional learning, all of the things that make it what it is. They just, we help with that. So we have curriculum that's based on classroom use. We have engagement for families who want to do this. We're looking at after-school programs, trying to teach community leaders, et cetera, how to use this program, and we're finding that the engagement is great, and it also just makes us feel so good to hear from these kids, to hear from these teachers, to see that the work that they're doing is really meaningful, and also it starts a momentum. It starts a movement of letting young kids know that they can do something, they can make change.
So we had the pleasure of sitting on a convening that brought together folks from across sectors to think about what this new movement around service might look like. And it always stood out to me that you said at one point, we have to stop assuming that the level of impact of someone on the younger age of the age continuum is different than a 25-year-old. How does this work that you're doing through Service Stars showcase that? Because that's a powerful statement.
Yes, and I want to go back to my point that we want to make sure that kids understand they don't need to be doing something at a global scale. And I think what we're really trying to show is that impact can be on a one-to-one level. It can be an impact on the person who's doing service. It can be an impact on the classroom and the community that's getting involved in it. And we really are trying to showcase a wide range of things that kids can do that actually move the needle on making the world a better place and a brighter place, as opposed to saying, like, if you can't solve for clean water or world hunger, just sit down and, do your thing. And I think what we're learning is that kids have really big ideas and really big ambitions. I wish they could be our leaders. We're trying to equip them to be our future leaders. But that for them, taking the first step towards whatever problem they can identify in their community that they want to help solve is going to set them on a course for really being able to do that in the ongoing future.
Through their whole lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm curious, you also built this beautiful workbook that is used for young people, but it also strikes me that it's useful for parents. Are you hearing anything from parents about the importance of service or how they're seeing these value sets, these opportunities come to life through Service Stars or these resources you're putting out there?
Yes, definitely. As a parent myself, I found that there were a lot of barriers to organize service opportunities with younger kids. Even for people who are really motivated to do it, there is a lot of that kids can't interact with people. The kids have to be, kind of corralled off to the side if they're even welcome to join in any of these opportunities. And I find that really challenging, and ultimately I understand, but I find it misguided and I wish we could work around it. So what we're giving parents the opportunity to do is to figure out how to do this themselves, not to wait until they have an invitation for kids of all ages to come to the community food pantry, but to start a small fridge or whatever work they choose to do that they can be the kind of agents of doing it instead of waiting for a larger opportunity. And what we're finding is similar for parents as it is for kids. They just needed to put a name on things they're already doing and things that they have always felt were important, but teaching kids to understand that a lot of that is service in and of itself, I think is very rewarding to parents. It goes back to a lot of the conversations we have with kids and with our readers in Time for Kids around the difference between doing chores and being a member of a household, or trying to explain to them, what is sort of required as a person as opposed to something that might be going above and beyond or a paid professional. And I think with service, it's been really important for parents to be able to show their kids things they're already doing are a great foundation, and they can, build up from there.
One of the things that we should note here is in the research that the Allstate Foundation commissioned around all of this work, we went out and actually spoke with parents, both through surveys and focus groups, and it stood out to them that service is a vehicle, not just for education, but a vehicle for their young people to have a sense of belonging. It has a really powerful effect on mental health and sense of community. And so finding ways to start that as early as possible is huge.
I'd also love to add that something that we often at Time for Kids are trying to help teachers address something they need support with. And we found that there are a lot of teachers who stumble with service because it can be complicated based on their students and their kids to address certain topics that are an issue within their classrooms. And I totally understand that and can only imagine. I am not an educator, but I have been so heartened to see that not only are teachers embracing this and stepping forward, but that the kids do not seem to see this as a barrier whatsoever. They can be talking about, food insecurity in the classroom. Maybe they're aware, maybe they're not, that several kids are experiencing it that are sitting around them, but they just press forward. And I think it's really important for us to empower and enable teachers and kids to talk about problems even that are amongst themselves instead of othering it or making any feelings of shame around these things. And that's been a great part of this.
What a powerful tool for normalizing our lived experiences and how we actually work in community together to resolve issues. I want to go, Ron, to the other end of the age continuum. So you and your organization work with middle and secondary school. Will you talk to us a little bit about the programs you've launched and your thoughts on this mission and acceleration of youth service?
First of all, forget about what I'm about to say. I'm just geeking out listening to the two of you. Like, I got so many ideas now about how we can help. We need to catch up, because I figure, how can we help all of our middle and high school leaders understand how to take some risk and not be so caught up in the risk averse. There's going to be these problems, right? We'll follow up on that. As all of you who have been a part of the National Honor Society or National Student Council know, that service is one of the pillars for both. And so, all of our kids that are in those programs do service-oriented projects. And it's just wonderful. But it's very similar to what you were talking about, is like you've empowered teachers and give resources to teachers to be able to shepherd these projects with their kids or programs in their classrooms. Well, we weren't funding kids to come up with their own service projects. And so shout out to CELO and Allstate Foundation, and specifically Greg, because through this partnership now, we are able to create a service grant project. And just recently, we gave out 171 grants that were 100% of buy-in for student-led, student-designed, student-iterated, student-dreamt projects. And I think it was like $140 some odd thousand in total. To your point, micro is great. Like, it doesn't have to be $1 billion or whatever, right? It could be $10, and these kids are going to turn that into gold. And so, really investing back in them. My wife and I have 4 children. The youngest one just graduated from college. The intervention for me, a lifelong educator now, the intervention for me was my kids pulled me aside one day and said, "Dad, your generation messed up the planet. Ours is going to fix it, but you guys need to get out of the way."
Yes.
And I was like, it's bad. When your kids ask you to sit down at a table, don't do it, because they're going to tell you some stuff you don't want to hear. But it changed the way I thought about service and youth and empowerment. And we live in this very deficit mindset world where, oh, we're behind and we need to catch up and this other. No. These kids are incredible. And they know so much now. And they have all these dreams and ideas about how they could make it better. And they're willing to put in the work to do it. So like, how can we figure out ways, at our organization, it's how can we figure out ways internally to remove barriers and provide supports to advisors and school leaders so that they will invest in their student leaders. Because if kids, our theory of action is if kids have a better sense of agent, if they feel seen and heard in school, and they have a sense of belonging and a sense of connection back to their community, all those issues, discipline, social problems, all of those things will go down because kids will be much more, attendance will go up, right? Achievement's gonna go up. All of those things that we commiserate about in education, we've not been addressing them systemically. We've been addressing them in the classroom, in the school, and in the community, but not together. And so to me, these opportunities bring together all of the good parts of our efforts and don't focus on the old stuff or the negative.
Is it all right if I just pick up on that? Because I loved what you said about getting out of their way. And I just want to underscore that.
Credit my kids.
No, absolutely correct. I mean, actually, that way of thinking is the right way to think about a lot of what we should be doing in schools. Anyone who's been around young people know that they come out insatiable learners, right? I mean, you cannot stop them from learning. They come out explorers. They come out idealistic, and they come out questioning. They come out pushing against what they don't agree with hard, right? Kids, if you have kids, you've seen this firsthand every single day. And it's only as they start to get older, especially starting around age 5 and later, when they become aware of what society expects from them, how it expects them to act, whether it expects them to question or not, and whether they get rewarded for that or punished. And that's the process of sort of tamping down a lot of those amazing qualities. So literally, a big part of what is needed is making sure that we're not doing that as adults and parents, but also as a school system, and actually instead doing the opposite, which is providing a platform for those natural tendencies just to continue to grow, because they're already there.
I'm super curious. Let's stay on this getting out of the way. I'm curious for each of you, what does it mean to get out of the way in the work of your organizations to enable service for young people?
First of all, it's about making our members, advisors and assistant principals and principals aware of the upside to what Alex was talking about. How do you unleash this, how do you continue or grow that curiosity and that quest for knowledge and that want to do right and want to do good in the world, right? And how do we not get in their way? So it's really understanding that there's way more to gain by letting it loose than there is to control it, right? These kids, I'm just going to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for all y'all, but as I look back and think, I tend to apply, that's why my kids intervened on me, right? I tend to apply sort of my thinking, how I came up unto the youth today. And I didn't have the world at my fingertips on a phone. Yep. I didn't know all the stuff that the kids know today, which is way too much, but they know a lot, right? Like, we didn't, for God's sake, I was looking in the library for a card in a drawer that, some of you don't even know what this is,
the
right?
card catalog, right?
And we had to submit a request to go get a copy of a magazine or a book. It was the kids have find it in 10 seconds. And so getting out of the way means applying a different set of thinking or different ways of thinking to kids in support of kids and the people who directly support kids, so that it's more about what's possible rather than all the reasons why you can't do it. In Hawaii, we have a saying, in case you didn't know, I'm born and raised in Hawaii. In Hawaii, we have a saying, if can, if no can, how can? So in English, if you can do it, do it. If you can't do it, figure out a way to do it, right? And so this is kind of that spirit, is we've banged our head against the wall for 200 years on this current educational model. And yeah, it's produced great, smart kids, but did it do that for every kid? No. right? So some kids aren't going to fit the cookie cutter. And today there is no cookie cutter. It's just, you can make up whatever cookie you want. So how do we create these kinds of open-ended opportunities? I was thinking about this connection that you got with Time for Kids, and like, how do we help people understand that, like, at the earlier the better, to understand service and giving back to your community. So.
You asked the question, what does it maybe take to get out of the way? I think it's important to ask, well, why are we getting in the way in the first place? And again, you actually, I think your answer with principals was spot on, and it applies at different levels in the systems. You talked about risk. It's sometimes risky. It's risky for teachers as well to create that opening. It's especially risky if you're not well supported. It's especially risky if you don't have if the person above you, if your principal doesn't have your back, or if your principal and your superintendent doesn't have your back. And so a lot of enabling this is actually providing support and some safety and maybe some empathy for the adult in that room. For us who are really thinking about teachers as our main sort of point of action, but making sure that that teacher then is supported, has someone behind their back, that enables the teacher then to create some possibility, let things go wrong maybe, but know that there's a safety net and that they have what they need.
Getting out of the way does not mean walking away.
No. It means getting out of the kids' way and watching them aside with pride as they do amazing things.
May I jump in?
I would love it.
For us at Time for Kids, part of our news literacy and media literacy goal and mission is in getting out of the way of telling kids how and what to think. And we put a ton of effort in every word, in every story, in every issue, at every grade level to make sure that what we're presenting is information and facts. And when we present opinions, we label them as such. We'll attribute it to whoever it is who said something. We will make sure that we are trying very hard to have them understand what's fact, what's opinion, what's myth, what's not fact, etc. And I think getting out of the way there is teaching kids to learn about the world in a way that lets them figure out what to make of it. We can explain it to them, but we can't tell them what to think about it. And that can be from certain dry topics. This week, let's say we're working on tariffs. It's not the most exciting thing to explain to kids, but it's important. And it can be all the way to other really important and more interesting and more human interest topics like service. We want to let them know some things that are out there, some ways they can move the needle, but we're not telling them what they need to do. The point of our missions and service stars, some jumping off points, but any way that they want to come to the table, any way that they want to dip a toe in, we support.
I want to pivot here real quick and ask a quick question before we go to the audience. So we're about 2 years into this strategy from the Allstate Foundation, really thinking exponentially about what the impact could be. If we were to do something in your organizations for youth, for educators broadly, what is the thing that you think we really need to focus on to really advance youth service in the next 2 to 3 years? And that could be from the lens of young people, parents, educators.
Well, I have an answer that picks up on a thread that maybe the audience is also picking up on, but I'll just try to draw it out, at least in my head. You've heard a lot of mention of the catalyst Greg at the Allstate Foundation, and I think it's just so fascinating how it started with an idea there. He roped in organizations, yours included, right? And I'll just say, I can speak for Donors Choose, and some of my colleagues are here. We weren't exactly perfectly suited to task, and he knew that, and he sort of egged us on to making some changes in our model to cause us to grow. And I think we're happy that we did that, and we now have a new focus on service. You mentioned how it was embedded in what you were doing, but it allowed you to give a name. And then, so that's a sort of catalytic effect that has. And then I was just listening to you, Andrea, describe how, one of the things that you do is you highlight kids, specific kids who are doing amazing work, and then support that kid to continue to share it out. And so that cascading is quite amazing, maybe especially in today's era where a lot of us are looking for reasons to be optimistic, but not just reasons to be optimistic. A lot of us are looking for tactical things that we can really do to make a difference that improve the condition of the world. This is quite a multiplicative way to do it. It's a high leverage way to do it, and so I would call out, what are some ways that you can not only do the service, but then think about, sparking just the very next level, like having your kids invite some other kids to do it, or finding another organization and asking them to join you in partnership. Because you can just see, like, it started out with one idea and look at the impact that it's already had.
And I would say from our perspective, I think a really big focus for us is in growing adoption of service stars, in reaching more kids. I had the privilege of learning from Greg's lived experience of doing all of this kind of service work his whole life. We then had a first year, a pilot year of Service Stars. We learned a lot from feedback from teachers, families, kids. We're now putting out a program in year 2 that I feel like we've refined and tested and learned, and what we're ready for is to have it be, go big. And again, there's no barrier to entry for being part of it. There's nothing that there's no financial commitment. Anyone who wants to join us, we want to join. And I think it would be like a huge goal for us to be able to show the work that teachers and kids are doing and have other kids get interested and inspired and make it into a movement. I think something we touched on is that if you don't catch them when they're young, or certainly this is part of my work, everything we do, if you don't catch kids when they're young and setting their behaviors and their values and their priorities, it's harder to come back to it. And I think starting with 5-year-olds and working through 13, which is the age group at which Time for Kids' audience drops off, is a time in which the intrinsic benefit of service is there for them, right? They're not to be cynical, starting to think about their college applications or starting to feel like they should get involved in X, Y, or Z. And I think if we can get more kids at this young age understanding that things they're already doing are acts of service and getting interested in and excited about it, it will ultimately really become a movement that I think will grow and will certainly benefit future generations.
I love that you guys, CELO and Allstate, reached out to us and started talking with us about schools. Because our mission, before all of this started, our mission was raising the next generation of courageous leaders with the knowledge, skills, and dispositions to transform the K-12 environment. And it was school and student leaders, not just school leaders. People think Principals Association, boo, right? But no, come on now, we're nice people. It's students as well, right? And so I appreciate the fact that you all thought about us as that. But there's so much more work to be done in that space before every single assistant principal who is a principal in training, right, in essence, if that assistant principal starts their tenure as a trainee or a new assistant principal thinking, I got to get student agency, student voice, student service projects up on the map in our school. And they do that, and they build it and grow it, right? And empower teachers and support staff to do that with kids. Then when they become a principal, they don't need to be taught or converted anymore, right? And then our membership, 60% of secondary, the superintendents, 60% of new superintendents come from the secondary rank. So if you think about a pipeline, if you raise teachers and support staff in that environment, and then you have new administrators being raised in that environment, and then they become the superintendent of the district, then nobody needs to be converted anymore because they came up with that service orientation. And so, I love that we're all playing this game together. It's cool, and I like that it's both the short game and the long game, right? Like we have to do something today, but we also have to build this pipeline for the long term. And I would love to see school leadership programs, which we administer and lead, shift all in this direction of service learning is an integral part of your, and then in addition to that, elevating student voice and agency is part of that. Because if you think about preparation for life after school, people think, oh, career academies, okay, career pathways, that's great, right? Or advanced coursework and early college dual credit, that's great too, okay? But the service learning component is that third, in my mind, the third bucket. Yeah. That one that teaches the same they're not soft skills anymore. They're real skills, right? Those real skills that kids need for life after school, you can learn them in any of those three, and you could be in all three programs if you want as a student in school, right? So I love the idea of that being part of the schooling experience because it makes total sense of like that's how we should be raising the next generation of Americans.
It's also an antidote to decreasing social trust. So how do we help to see one another, feel connection and community, which is incredibly powerful. Let's go to the audience and see if we have any questions. And if you have a question, we'd love you to come up to one of the two microphones. Feel free to jump in line. All right, we've got some folks moving. And when you come on up, would you mind sharing your name and your question?
Hi, my name is Brandy Jackson. I am the CEO of Scoutlier, stands for Scouting Outliers. And first of all, I want to say thank you to Donors Choose because I started my career as a teacher for 25 years, and we got moved into a STEM lab with no materials. And so I had to write challenges to build out our whole entire lab. And it created this on-road for how we could actually teach students to be citizen scientists through research. And now that's like my whole entire company and my whole gig. So how do you see, my question for you is, how do you see opportunities for students to participate in citizen science and like actually become researchers fitting in with the idea of service? Because to me, they're very connected.
That's a great question. First of all, thanks, Brittany, because I think you just gave an example of why I think I have such a great job, because I just get to receive thanks like that, and then I try my best to just send it to the team that actually does the work. But I'm so glad that Donors Choose made a difference for you in your classroom. I think one of the projects that I highlighted is actually an example of this. The one focused on bringing pollinators into the community gardens that's just one example. Like it's also a ton of fun just to read the diversity of examples. But that's an example of a sort of cross-disciplinary project where there's a clear science aspect to it as well. They're learning about the biology of these systems. They have to learn about the different equipment that they brought in. And they are doing it, so I think that qualifies as citizen science. They're actually going out and I read some of what the teacher wrote, because they write follow-ups, as you know, about going out and then tracking the birds and measuring the birds coming in, and then she even included a picture. And so I think ideally, it's just one of the different cross-disciplinary examples where service ties to the learning objectives that we were talking about before. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Delaney Beavers. I actually am a 4-H educator and youth development educator from Oklahoma. And citizenship and civic engagement is something that's very, very important to our 4-Hers. But I'm interested to know, how do you start that conversation with my Clover buds who are our 5 to 8-year-olds? How do you start talking to them about that in a way that they still are engaged with? Because I think if I start talking to them about doing things for other people, I sometimes get the eye roll and why would I do that? So,
great
very
question.
Fair, very fair. I think that for the very youngest, so for our kindergarten and first grade readers, we're really teaching them literacy as much as media and news literacy. And one of the things that we find that engages them is something that makes them feel good or makes them see themselves doing something, reflects on them in their own life. I think that it's challenging to teach kids that something that can feel good to you feels good to other people. And in naming acts of kindness, small things that they're doing and calling that service, I think it really opens up the floodgates for them to understand that, they don't have to be solving huge problems or doing even new things outside of their regular life to be making a difference with other people. And I find that kids that age are age appropriately and totally charmingly very self-focused. But if you can help them understand that everybody else is self-focused too, and if you can make them have a good moment, it will be a good moment for you. I think it's really helpful. Not that we're trying to teach our youngest kids that service should make you feel good and that's why you should do it. But being able to recognize when you're very young that you can help somebody else have a better day or help somebody else out of a tough moment, whatever it might be, whether it's not having someone to sit next to at recess, to play with at recess, or whatever it is, I think it's a good way to start. And it really is about the words we choose. I think service is tough for younger kids. I think kindness is a much more inclusive way to be able to, kindness and helpfulness are a much more inclusive way to be able to get kids that age to feel like I can make a difference. And the last thing I'll say is that I think rewarding great behavior by calling it out and naming it is really important. We want to make sure we're not making the reward kind of the motivation, right? So I'm not suggesting a sticker chart every time a kid does something great. It should be an intrinsic desire for them. But telling the rest of the class about a moment or, the rest of the kids, even on the playground, about look what so-and-so did to be helpful, I think really builds a sense of pride and a sense of, can-do attitude in kids that age.
Thank you. All right, I think we have time for one more question. Oh, I see two folks. We're going to try and squeeze in two there.
I was going to say, no pressure. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Josh with the Montana Campus Network for Civic Engagement, and we work primarily with college students, student volunteers, and AmeriCorps members. But I'm just curious about anybody's reflection on the state of the service learning movement and kind of stuff done through curriculum.
So a lot of the service learning stuff that is the most well established is not like in a curricular. It's really like folks just kind of taking their own initiative. And this is my point earlier, like if it's kind of been in spite of, not because of, which I'm sure is consistent with your experience. Yeah. And that's why I was saying we need more people to get involved and want to do it, and then the cry for like, could we come up with some like materials that would help people or curricular materials that would help people? But I'm not a fan of let's write a curriculum for it and pass it out to everybody, because the beauty of this work is it's self-generated, right? Like, so what like common guardrails or principles, PLE, could we establish? Like, these are some really thoughtful and smart guidelines or guardrails that we can establish that would help people iterate, within this quote unquote boundary. We're trying not to have boundaries, but we have to have a few, right? To just to keep it manageable. But I'm generally not one to favor like a one size fits all, pass out the curriculum, because even the person before you asked the question about Oklahoma, I was in Nebraska and talking about career pathways with principals there, and a couple of principals from very rural, like they're the head football coach and the principal and the bus driver, rural school. They were talking about, well, we don't have those programs here. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're in Nebraska. You have 4-H. Oh, yeah, we got that. You have Future Farmers. Yeah, we got that. And then they start telling me about like, oh, do you know that you can make plastic out of corn? Like ethanol can be converted into plastic pellets and now we can ship them. I'm like, guys, you are doing career workforce readiness, career pathway work. And they were like, oh, really? Like, so sometimes we don't know that we're doing it because somebody hasn't labeled it for us, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing it. So it's kind of a roundabout way to answer your question.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to wrap up with two things. I'm going to ask if each of you for just 1 minute, what is your call to action to the audience for when they leave here? And I'm wondering if, Andrea, you could get us started, and then we'll go to Ron and end up with Alix.
Yes, mine is really simple. Please check out the Service Stars resources that we've created. If you go to timeforkids.com, you will be there is a clear path towards our Service Stars site. That URL for that's a bit more complicated. what you'll find is a set of resources that you should be able to pick up and just use. There's not a lot of background information you need. Ideally, our missions will be suited for kids at many ages, something you can figure out what might work and what might not, and we would love your feedback is another part of that. So first, please try it, and second, please tell us how we could evolve, adapt, how we could better serve you. As I noted, Greg first found me, which I feel so grateful for, by just sending me an email. You can reach me at andrea@time.com. It's pretty straightforward. We would love to be able to learn from your experiences and your needs and wants, and we'd be really grateful for your participation in the program.
Ron, what are you thinking?
Every one of you here is interested in, is here because you serve others. So I guess my call to action to you is be unapologetic about that commitment. Don't take no. If no can, figure out how can. Because the kids deserve this kind of learning experience. And yes, we can talk about all the adult things, we need it, we do. All of those things are true. But for me, it's about every kid in this country deserves a world-class education, and service learning is part of it. And so if you're not doing it, then figure out a way to just try something.
Alex.
Ron, I'm going to be taking that to my daughters when I get back home. If no can, how can?
But they're going to use it against you.
Well, that's okay.
No, they're going to use it.
I'm ready. My call to action is so immediate. You guys are going to be in the back, is that right? As you leave this session, please pick up a Donors Choose gift card. And please do not lose it in your tote bag, because that's real value to a teacher that you get to pick. And so take it and use it on the site and support a teacher. Oh, yeah, great. Well, applause to you, because you're going to be supporting teachers.
This is amazing. One of the things that Greg talks about all the time is that to do this work, we need three things. We need time, we need funding, and we need resources and assets to distribute the work. And time is unfortunately one of those things that we cannot create more of, but we can help with the resources and the funding. And so with that in mind, I want to call to stage the Allstate Foundation to share a few words.
Well, first off, thank y'all so much for joining us. Can we give another round of applause to our wonderful panel? We're so fortunate. I guess I should introduce myself, sorry. My name is Greg Weatherford, and I'm the director at the Allstate Foundation. Thank you all for joining our panel and so much of our programming this week. Again, our partners are so wonderful and having such a tremendous impact all over the country that we really are grateful for everything that we're doing together. One thing that I did want to mention is the wonderful contribution of the $100 gift cards. We know that so many of you hopefully will be excited to go out and support a teacher that's leading service and promoting service, or if you yourself are an educator, we want to make sure that we have provided you with some resources to be able to do that. And then I also would like to say, knowing that this was such a rousing panel, and we have these two wonderful programs, both Service Stars and the classroom grants that we do with Donors Choose and Time for Kids, and the service grants that Ron talked about that we started this year in partnership for high schools. We're going to give both programs $250,000 to make sure. We want to make sure that when all of you go home and tell your friends and you go log onto the website yourself, that you have plenty of resources to tap into. So just to make that crystal clear, the Allstate Foundation will be contributing $250,000 to the next cycle of the NASSP student-led service grants, and then we'll also be contributing $250,000 to the Service Stars Donors Choose educator grant program that we have in partnership with Time for Kids and Donors Choose. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Greg.
This is one of those moments where you can see from the visceral reaction that folks did not know this was going to happen. it's also proof of concept that this work is so needed and important, and that the Allstate Foundation is so deeply committed. Greg, I want to thank you personally, and I know everyone on this stage wants to, because you're a visionary. And you and the team at the Allstate Foundation have enabled such radical impact in the lives of young people, educators, and you continue to do it every day. So we are so enormously grateful to you and the Allstate Foundation for all of this.
Thank y'all so much. I think that's a way to end things. Thank y'all.
As we wrap up the panel, one of the things I think we might close on, besides pure joy,
Man, I gotta take a nap.
right, there's going to be like a hooting and hollering in a minute here. I think one of the things we end on is perhaps a quote from someone that some of you have heard me use far too often, civil rights icon Grace Lee Boggs. And Grace would say, it's never about critical mass, it is about critical connections. And what you heard on this stage today was a thoughtful interweaving of cross-sector partnerships, of what it means to see young people as fully present and able to contribute. Organizations that are helping get resources directly into the hands. That's the work. And so we thank you and hope you're inspired leaving here today to go out and do this work every day in your own lives. Thank you so much.